record. I would like to thank you for your interest in the Coloquios. And I thank you all the colleagues here, and especially our invited speakers, Ana Maria Monte and Nader Hakim. Well, we all know each other, but I think it's a few words to present our honorable speakers. Our work. Now, Ana Maria Monte is Associate Professor of Legal History at the Bocconi University in Milan. She has published extensively on the history of commercial law, history of circulation of legal ideas, networks of jurists and legal professionals. And in the 19th and 20th century, just sometimes the Zoom screen interrupts me. And also she has worked on the history of justice in the Ancien Regime, the book on the Senato di Milano as a Supreme Court of Justice. And Nader Hakim is Professor of Legal History at the Institutional Université de Bordeaux. He has worked also on the history of legal doctrines, intellectual history of law, history of legal education and legal literature, with a special focus on the 19th and 20th century, and always under this cultural methodological approach, which sounds better in French or in Latin languages than in English, histoire culturelle des savoirs juridiques, en pluriel. And today, Ana Maria and Nader are going to present this study on bibliometrics, methods, and legal history. They have published together in Clio Temis 2 years ago. And well, for those who are not used to Zoom, I think everybody is used to, but just to remind you that you could activate the speaker mode in the upper right side of the screen. I think it's more comfortable. And then for the debate, we activate again the gallery view. And I will be keeping silent all the participants to avoid noises, but you, of course, then later on, everyone can activate. I'm not such a dictator, because the Zoom allows to everyone can raise the hand later, and we will have around 45 minutes for the presentation and further 40 minutes for the debates. So Ana Maria and Nader, the floor is yours. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you very much, Puglia, for the organization of this presentation, of this seminar, and thank you to all the participants. I will share my screen. I hope you can see. So we are delighted to discuss with you our research on bibliometrics methods in legal history. As Laura mentioned, we published a couple of years ago a text on the text was published in the Clio Temis review. First of all, let me tell you how we started our research. Each of us had studied law doctrine from the end of the 19th century to the first half of the 20th century, and we gained knowledge of the 19th, 20th century legal thought. We focused on some relevant authors who gave a specific attention to key issues such as legal methods and practice. And we became interested in the circulation of legal thought in Europe during that period of time. In particular, we decided to study the cultural exchanges from back then that happened among jurists from different countries. Back in 2013, together with Massimo Meccarelli, Federico Dren, Ferdinando Mazzarella, and Antonella Meniconi, we founded a research group called Networks of Jurists. And its goal was to shed some light on the legal circulation in Europe. And it led us to lively discussions on the topic from different points of view. Our purpose today is to give you a general overview on the research which we conducted together with me and Nader, and on the methodological approach. And we would like also to present you some practical examples. Before we get into the main body of our presentation, we would like to make a couple of points. Firstly, we would like to highlight that we take the transnational circulation of jurists' ideas into consideration to better understand the renewal of legal methods which occurred in many continental European countries at the turn of the 20th century. Indeed, connections and reciprocal influences among jurists facilitated exchanges, as well as contaminations with other legal systems and thinking. Secondly, before starting, we would like to state that what we are presenting today is the first output of a small-scale pilot research adopting quantitative methods to study networks. So, moving on very quickly to the core of our presentation, our project is aimed at exploring the way that networks of jurists were developed and connections made during the so-called Belle Époque, when people, ideas circulated. What we are trying to do is identify and analyze networks of jurists. Legal thought circulated through different meanings: translations, conferences, personal correspondence, and above all, through law journals. We are aware of the current interest in network in very different fields of study, especially in social sciences and historical research. The study of networks has an interdisciplinary character and most certainly deserves attention. However, we are not going to expand on this topic right now. On the contrary, we would like to highlight that law journals were a very important channel of communication, both at national and transnational levels in those times. Law journals were a channel of transmission of knowledge and transfer of ideas and legal thought. So our research question is to verify if and how law journals were means of transfers of legal knowledge. And the first step of our pilot research was to choose two law journals, a French one and an Italian one, and verify for each journal the kind and number of citations of foreign authors. For France, we chose la Revue Générale du Droit, de la Législation, de la Jurisprudence en France et à l'étranger, which was a general law journal founded in 1877. It was one of the leading journals in France, especially between 1880 and 1914. Its aim was to promote law as a science, and it was a well-connected journal. For Italy, we chose the Archivio Giuridico, which was founded in 1868 by Piero Ellero, but soon it was directed by Filippo Serafini, and it was based in Pisa. It was a general law journal, as well as the Revue Générale. The director, Filippo Serafini, had studied law in Austria, in Vienna, and in Germany, and he wanted to promote a renewal of legal methods. He was interested in Roman law and in German legal studies. The aim of this Archivio Giuridico was to spread knowledge and influence of German legal doctrine in Italy. The publication was to be continued by his son. You can see here his name, Enrico. He's the son of Filippo. And in 1904, Enrico Serafini reaffirmed that the main scope of Archivio Giuridico was to focus on legal studies, paying attention both to theory and practice. Roman law was still considered at the core of modern legal thinking. However, the journal was open to very different contributions. Archivio Giuridico, this Italian review, was well known also abroad, and it was read especially in France. Among the readers, I can mention Saleil, Raymond Saleil. So for each review, we checked the issues for the decade 1900-1910, and we, without too much surprise, we found many quotations of foreign authors. Generally speaking, we can say that in the Italian journal, in Archivio Giuridico, German scholars were the main but not the unique reference for Roman law and legal history studies. The same happened for public law. This is not surprising, we already knew that. Concerning another field of study, international law, French scholars were the main reference. We can observe nearly the same for the French journal, for the Revue Générale, in respect of Roman law and public law. In relation to private law, to civil law, on the contrary, the bibliographical reference in the Revue Générale du Droit were more nationally oriented. So, to better understand the impact of foreign authors, we decided to go further and to focus firstly on the foreign book reviews. For both Revue Générale and Archivio Giuridico, we checked all the foreign book reviews published in the decade 1900-1910. And again, we discovered something that we already knew and something new. We were aware of the editorial circulation back then, but not of the geographical distribution of foreign books reviewed in different fields of law. We were aware of the importance of translations, even if we should not draw conclusions based only on translations. We found that French translations of English, American, and even German works circulated in Italy. Italy itself was a well-known land of translation. However, France seemed to be the place where most translations destined to circulation were made. Then we decided to have a look at the quotations of foreign authors in selected essay published in our reviews. Again, for the same period of time. What seems to be more interesting is that cultural exchanges among lawyers and professors coming from different countries were especially intensive in the new fields of study, mostly related to the changes, social and economic changes of those times. At the turn of the 20th century, the contents of older disciplines were evolving rapidly. Suffice it to think of commercial law or insurance law. At the same time, new disciplines were emerging. New subjects such as industrial law or labor law could not be ignored. Moreover, in those years, even practical teachings were transformed in scientific disciplines. In these cases, foreign scholars' citations proved a huge circulation of legal thinking. We will give you an example of this concerning life insurance law. Life insurance was a business sector which was well organized and marked by a strong transnational dimension. In France, lawyers dealing with the topic were mainly practitioners. However, early 20th century European legal doctrine made special efforts to study life insurance and its implication. So now it's time to show you some results. So I leave the floor to Nader.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Thank you all for the invitation and for being here. We try to speak correct English, sorry for my bad accent. Moving to the outputs of our pilot research, two kinds of outputs. First outputs, it's about, as Anna Maria said, about book reviews. So we first a small point of our methodology and the software we used. We used a software called Jeffy. It was a free software, very useful for us, and it allowed to visualize, to map the circulation of ideas and to visualize the network of what you want, whatever you want. But for us, it's the quotation of foreign books in those law journals. So we began to read all those law journals. Here is a very important point. Our work is not to replace legal history at all. We want only one thing, is to enrich legal history method. So we try to find something to show that we can't see when you take a book or a law journal, you read it, you can't read it, all of it. It's too big. So you choose an article, a paper, and you read it, and you use legal historical method to read it. But for us, the point was to I don't know how to say it in English, but to take all those quotations and all those book reviews for foreign books in our law journal. So here we have two law journals. On the left, you have the Archivio Jurídico, and on the right, you have the Revue Générale du Droit. So when you have a look on this first graph, it's very interesting to note that we have two levels of connections. On the right of the Archivio Jurídico, you have less quotations of foreign books, and on the right of the Revue Générale de Droit, you have much more of it. So the first point for us is to say that one of the law journals is more connected, more strongly connected to European and international books, and in the Italian part, Archivio Jurídico, you have less book reviews of foreign book. So this is the first point. Maybe we can move back to the first. Yes, thank you. So I don't want to enter in the details of those graphs. They are too rich and too complicated to comment. But as you can see, when you are trying to map to use bibliometrical method, you have edges and nodes. So here you have on the left, Archivio Jurídico is one node, and you have another one. It's the book, the author of the book, which was reviewed. So for example, you have Alfasa, the first one on the top. Alfasa is a book, and Archivio Jurídico has reviewed this book. So we have all those books without any discrimination. The purpose of this kind of study, bibliometrical studies, is to take all the references. If it's important or not is not the matter here. You have to quote and to take all the data with no interference of the importance on the if a book is famous or not. It's not a matter at all, just a data. Okay. So we have the source, the first age here, and you have the book. So you can see all those books, and the color of the link is the nationality of the author of the book. So you have a lot of colors. It's not very useful to see all those books, but we have, for example, in this graph, you have 26 countries, and in pink you have Italy, for example. In green you have Germany. Germany, for example, is 20% of the book reviews. Italy is not surprised for the Italian part, for the Archivio Jurídico, it's 24%, and France, 12%. You have also Belgium, Switzerland, and UK. Here you can see how many books were reviewed in the Archivio Jurídico and where they come from. And if you look on the right side, on the Revue Générale de Droit, it's the same principle. I can give you some numbers. You have some surprises. For example, 4% of the books are coming from United States, 2% from Brazil, 2% from Spain, for example. Russia is also nearly 3% of the books, but most of them are from Germany, Italy, and France, of course. You have also other countries. I can quote them: Bulgaria, India, Peru, Serbia, Denmark, Korea, and Mexico. So for us, it was very interesting to see not only how many countries, but also the strongness of the link. If you can see on the graph, the how you say épaisseur, I'm a little bit lost. You know, when you see a thin link, it is most of the time one quotation, one review. But if you see a strong link, here you can see there's many quotations of the same book or for example. So here we can learn a little bit from this simple graph, very simple one. We can see here that for the French, can you come back, please, Anna Maria? Sorry. Yes, for the previous one. Thank you. Here on the right, for the Revue Générale du Droit, we can see a lot of Italian books, 35%. And if you compare it with Germany, Germany is only 13% of the book reviewed in the Revue Générale du Droit at the same time. It's very interesting. Among 25 countries, we have most of the books come from Italy, not from Germany. We thought previously that we thought before German were more important. No, Italy was much more important for the book reviews in the Revue Générale du Droit than Germany, for example. Very interesting point. So we can argue here that the French network in the Revue Générale du Droit is strongly linked with Italy, and not only in a matter, it's all matters. Here we have only book reviews, okay? Not in life insurance, we see it later. So we can see another thing, the intensity of the graph here on the right is something linked to the political decision of the reviewer of the law journal itself, of course, but it seems for us that French were more connected than Italy at the same time. So this information is not, how I can say that, it's not, okay, I made it differently. We have to be careful with this information. It is not meaning that French lawyers, French scholars were more linked than Italian ones. It only means that this review at that time has a strongest network than the other one. So we have to be very careful with this information. We have here an objective information, but we have to put it in our knowledge of legal history, and then we can see what happened here, why the Revue Générale du Droit is more connected than the Italian review. So it's very interesting for us to go with this information, with those links, and to see why this intensity is strongest in France than Italy. So as Anna Maria said earlier, the language skills, for example, is very important for us. Translation is a matter, but we have to be careful with the language skills of the authors, and especially of the managers of those law reviews. We see later this point about the life insurance. Sometimes one manager, one director of a law journal can build himself alone a strong international network. And then when you use bibliometrical method, appears that the Revue Générale du Droit is strongly linked with the international network. But sometimes it's only one of the director of the law journal who has this international network. And why he have it? Sometimes it's only because he have language skills. So it's very interesting for us. We see about Valérie later, but it's very strongly connected to the political will of the law journal, a collective will, but sometimes it's linked with an individual will or individual skills or investment on his work. So we can say a lot about only this graph, but we have to move to the next one. Okay, if we move to the next one, here it's just to show a totally different way to map and to represent the same results. It is the same results, but here we separate archivio juridico and revue générale du droit. And what we want to say here is very important for us, because when you map differently the same result, the same data, you produce something totally new and a new information. You have, of course, the same information. You can see very easily that on the right, it's more intensive and more, you have more links and edges than to the left with the archivio juridico. So this is the same information. It's not a problem. But in the previous one, sorry, Anna Maria, can you come back? Sorry for the first one. You have something you can't have with the second graph. Here you have the edges between the two law journals, for example. So it's very interesting for us why in two comparatively similar law journals, at the same time, you have so few book reviews, identical book reviews. And we can look which book have the attention of the two law journals at the same time. It's very interesting for us. I take just one example, because we are in Madrid today. It's Omatel Tusquets, for example, which is, we have quite few book reviews of Spanish book. But we have here Omatel Tusquets, for example, who was a specialist of labor accident and labor law in Spain at that time. This book took the attention of both the law journal, both team, because we're speaking about people, about managers, about director of the law review who choose to review this book, or we have a lawyer who sends a book review to the law journal. So it's something else. It's more complicated than that, but I have to simplify a little bit my analysis here. So here we have the common link, common quotation here at the middle. So this way to show the references and the data is totally different than the second one. We can go back to the second one. Here, the way you visualize the data is disconnected. You have on one side the Italian one and the other side the French one. So what we want to say is we have to be very careful when we use this mapping of data, because the way you have to, I don't know how to say it in English, you have to program the software. You have to make a lot of choices. So this is a strong and hard difficulty for us all, because each step of the mapping of knowledge is a choice. So you have to justify, and you have to you have to be careful, because it transforms the results. For example, for those two first graph, we built something like, maybe I can't remember, it was 3 years ago, but maybe it was 4 years ago, maybe 20 or 30 different graph before this one, because each graph means something else, and so you choose to show something. So our purpose is not to say here you have something totally new and totally revolutionary. That's not at all what we want to say. We want to say we can use it to show things you can't see when you only read books. But we want to say we have to be very careful by using these tools, because there is so many choices we have to make for building those graphs. So this here is the first example. Now we can maybe move to the second example we use, it is about life insurance this time. So we tried something else. We tried to focus on one single topic, and this time to build data with all the references, all the quotation in a paper, a number of paper. So the topic here is life insurance, as Anna Maria says earlier, which was very interesting for us because it was something new, something very new for lawyers at that time. So we ask ourselves how they build their thought about this new topic, and which references, which quotations they use to build the discourse they made about life insurance. So here we have some authors we choose, so also a choice, we choose to study. We have Guido Bonolis, who was professor of legal history. It's a legal historian, it's interesting also, in Macerata at the end, but before he was at Urbino, at Perugia, and then in Macerata, in Italy, of course. So he was the first one. Later, we'll see other actors of this field. We see a French one, Joseph Lefort, a lawyer, and then we'll see Jules Valéry, a scholar, professor of law in Montpellier, and then at the end we'll see another one. His name is Michele Zino, an Italian lawyer, not a scholar. So we mixed lawyers, practitioners, we mixed scholars, Italian and French, in these two law reviews, the Revue Générale du Droit and the Archivio Juridico. So with this example, we want to focus on all the references which were mobilized to create a legal discourse on a new topic. So to move to the graph 2, the previous one, yes, thank you. We have here an article, a paper in the Archivio Juridico at the end of the 19th century, written by Bonolis, so a lawyer, but also a legal historian in Macerata. And what we can see, how many references he made, how many countries, so we have the same information. So here, if you have a look on this graph, you can see in pink, you have Italian references. In green, you have French references, but you have also other colors, quite a few. It's very interesting that they also choose to quote what he have in his library, what he knew. Most of his references are Italian, it's not a surprise at all, and especially Vivante, who was the master of commercial law and especially in insurance law at that time. But what we see is that Bonolis quote Italian authors, French authors, especially Journal du droit international privé, Journal du Palais, other journals, of course. We see, without surprise, a reference to Savini, for example, very interesting. In this specific matter of life insurance, which was very new at that time, we see Vincit, for example, we see Savini. It's not a surprise for us. Most of the lawyers at that time quote those famous authors. We see German references, but we'll see also, which is very interesting, other references like, for example, United States. If you have a look, I don't know if you can see it here, the American Law Journal, the Albany Law Journal. You see another Wharton. It was also very, very interesting, also quoted by Bonolis. So if you want an overview, statistical data. You have 34% of the references are Italian, 31% French, and then more than 7% American. I can't find the number. 2% from Belgium and the rest from Germany. So we have only 5 countries involved here. So what we can say here, it's not very very useful for us, but just we can say French and Italy for Bonolis were at the same level of quotation, and the rest of the quotations are more theoretical or more references to link this new field to the classical thought. We think it's kind of, you have to quote some books in your papers, and it could be, we're not sure, of course, because we can't enter into the mind of the author. It's not the matter here at all. It's not a psychological study at all. We are just trying to analyze data. But we think when we read the article, that it is more, how you say, classical references, but he used really references from France, Italy, and United States, which was very interesting, and Belgium also, because we have some specialists from Belgium at that time in life insurance. So, I don't want to be too long. We can move to the graph 3. So we choose to add the next paper to the first one. So you at the bottom you see you hear the new one. It's from Lefort, who was a director of the Revue Générale du Droit at that time, and you see only French references. Very interesting. Small number of common references, and on the here you have the Italian paper we see previously. So what we can say, not much things. We can say Lefort is not internationally connected. It's very clear here. We see that he mobilized mostly French references to build his discourse, his knowledge on life insurance. Bonolis was much more international and Lefort much more national. We can move maybe to the next graph, please. So here, we found something very interesting. Valéry and Lefort, two French authors, one practitioner and one scholar, decided to translate into French the Bonolis study on life insurance. So they translate the previous text of Bonolis, but they add to the translation quotations, notes, footnotes. And this is very interesting because they enriched the previous paper of Bonolis to their own comments and to their own quotation. And of course, they quote Bonolis study, but they quote also the paper written by Lefort previously. So we have here 3 papers about nearly the same topic. Not exactly the same, but it's about life insurance. So here what we can say. Here, the number and the intensity of the quotations are very higher. You can see it. If we give you some statistic, it means nearly nothing. But here, when you have a mapping, visualization of it, it's very clear. You have much more quotations, but also you have much more various and different types of quotation. Of course, you have a lot of French quotation. The 2 authors are French, but you have a lot of countries. For example, just statistical data here, we have nearly 70% of French quotation, 10% from Italy, mostly the previous quotation with Bonolis, the same ones. We have 9% from Germany, 4% from United States, 2% from UK, and also less than 1% Holland, Belgium, Spain, Switzerland, Canada, Russia, etc. So despite of a larger number of French quotation, we have more countries involved here, 11 new countries involved in this paper. So we ask us why. Where is the difference between the previous papers? And here we see a new actor. The new actor is Valérie. And this is very interesting. Lefort can't add new references. He wrote about life insurance previously, and we see that he quote only French authors, French books, French papers. And all the new references are coming from Valérie. And here it's very interesting because we know, that Valérie have strong linguistic skills. He is the one who is connected to the American world. We see because he is the brother of Paul Valéry. Paul Valéry, the famous French poet and philosopher. We know that Valéry spends his youngness in Britain. So, and we know he read German, he read Spanish, he read English, Italian, and of course, French. So 5 languages involved in his skills. So here we can see he go further than Bonolis and add a lot of references, very interesting references. We don't have time to take each of them, but we need also to work with Anna Maria on those references. But it's very interesting for us to see how one actor change all the references. We can move to the 5th graph. Thank you. Here we found also in the Revue Générale du Droit another paper written by Valéry himself. It's not a translation this time. It's not a work with Lefort. It's Valéry. And it is a confirmation of what I said previously, what we found with Anna Maria. Here you see a lot of countries involved in this paper, a lot of quotation, new ones. This is very interesting. He add to the previous research in the life insurance field, new references. And as you can see, maybe we can focus on the Valéry paper. Very interesting. He add very classical references. You can see, for example, Doma. Where is Doma? I'm searching for Doma here. Yeah, you can see Doma, for example. What can be the reference to Doma? It's very classical to build something, and we think that this type of reference means something very strong because life insurance became a field, a legitimate field in legal studies. So he had old references to legitimate this field, this new field, but he had also new research and new paper. And you see a lot of names from different nationality. For example, I can give you some data. This time we have 8 new countries involved here. And we think it's strongly linked to the language skills, but also with the network of Valéry himself. Okay, maybe we can move to the last one. So the last one is a paper written by Zeno in Italy. Zeno is a practitioner. So for us, it's very interesting because he seems to be very disconnected. He is not a scholar. He is not as we know, of course, connected personally to the law journal and to the others. And we were curious to see which reference he used to build a paper about life insurance after the other ones. So he wrote in 1905, also in Archivio Juridico, of course. So what we can see is that Zeno, as a practitioner, mainly quote Italian papers, Italian references. But he used the studies of Bonolis and the French ones. Also, he quotes them, and he used a small number of common references. Here you can see them, for example, Ambrozelli, de Grandmaison, Charles Liancan, for example, and more from the Italian previous studies from Bonolis, Macchieri, Vivante, of course, Bonolis himself, Vidari, etc. But he is not connected with Lefort. Very small connection with Lefort. And this map for us is very interesting. We can say a lot about it because it can show how a practitioner build his knowledge and build his paper, his discourse on life insurance. But it can show also that legal knowledge is not cumulative. I don't know if the term is correct in English, but it's not always more. When you produce a paper, not everybody read you, so the paper is not used by others even after that. So it's very interesting, even in a small field like life insurance, you don't have a cumulative perspective. It's always very more complicated, and some studies are quoted everywhere, but some others not. So it's totally here we think it's totally useful to build those kind of map with a bibliometrical method because it can show in this small scale here about life insurance how the discourse, legal discourse is built and how authors contribute to the accumulation of knowledge in this legal field. So it's very interesting for us to see if they can be isolated, they can be strongly connected, and we can here show it very easily. Sorry, not easily at all, because a lot of work to to build these data. But for us, it was interesting to how to say it in English. I don't know. To go further, not only because in legal history we have common knowledge. We know, of course, it's evidence that German scholars were more prominent in the 19th century. It's obvious. For example, in Roman law, for example, in public law. But when we go in new fields, we can show it's quite different here because we can see the authors building their own knowledge and their own discourse with what they have really in their library, on their desk, and it's not theoretical, but it's very practical. So here, maybe you can move on the previous one, Maria, please. Thank you. Here, we can note that, for example, the common quotations are maybe very important for us. For example, if we need to study history of life insurance, of course, we are going to see Vivante, Bonolis, and all those actors. But we can also have a look on the common references. For example, Wharton. This one, you can see this name in legal historical books or works on life insurance. But here we can say, hey, this one was quoted by a lot of actors at that time. Or, for example, you can go and, for example, I have another one, sorry, it's my phone. Sorry, we have much more quotation. I don't have maybe the time to see it, but it shows a lot of things, this kind of study. I was too long, a lot of things to say, but maybe I can give the last word to Anna Maria and we can discuss all of it.
Okay. Thank you, Nader. Okay, here we have a few remarks we would like to discuss with you all. Something of what I'm saying has been already said by Nader, but let me sum up and conclude saying that we believe that digitization provides the opportunity to visualize our data in order to graphically track the circulation of scholars' works and create maps of networks of scholars. Through the graphs, we can discover important data which lead us to review or eventually change our knowledge of the circulation of legal thought. We can also map intellectual networks in a more precise way. The study of bibliographical quotations and references in law journals makes it clearer how a network of scholars was built up. And these networks can also show social and personal connections between scholars as well as intellectual relations. Social network analysis is a means to show the relations between a group of people in a cartographic way and to use their interactions as a quantitative way of analyzing such relations. With stress on specialties and intensity of personal relations. Our small-scale pilot research shows that France had a role in the diffusion of non-French foreign legal thought, and many Italian scholars read non-French and non-Italian scholars in French. French scholars were definitely more open to foreign doctrines than classical narrative says. They had strong Anglo-American connections. German scholars were not always the main reference of Italian scholars, at least in the new fields of law, and this until World War I. In public law, private law, Roman law, legal history, where German doctrine had for sure great impact, Italian jurists were also interested in non-German scholarship. Networks change according to the topic, according to the field of study or to the discipline. In our example on insurance law, links between France and Italy were more important than links with Germany. And so, in the end, the graphs show how a topic is intellectually built, as was saying Nader, by the stratification of the references, and legal journals have a strong influence in the building or the shaping of a field of law, of a discipline. So thank you very much for your attention.
I'm sorry to be too long.
Yes, we are a little bit out of time, but thank you very much. It was a very interesting, very inspiring presentation. I certainly want a bibliometric map of the field I'm studying. I'm not sure if I'm capable of doing it, but I'll open the floor to the debate, to the questions. The debate can be multilingual. No, we are not obliged to. We can use the dialects of the empire, not only the barbaric language. You can, I don't know how we can, the system could be the raise the hand or just open the microphone. Fernando has one question. I don't know, Hans-Peter, Heike. Okay, so many words. And Serge Doshi. Okay, until now, so 4 words, and then we open this round with these 4 words, and then maybe another one. Please, Fernando Liendo.
Yes. Morning. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much, estimada Ana María, Professor Joaquín, for your lecture. I have learned a lot. I have a few comments on two topics. First, regarding the sources, and the second is about the content uh, of the project. First, regarding the sources, I think that the main challenge here is the digitization of the sources. Uh, I have only experience with the Spanish legal journals, and I can say that few than 10%, being generous, of Spanish legal journals in the 19th century are digitized. No, so I think the first challenge is to put all that documents into a format in a electronic and digital sources. No, well, I think that in the German case, they are very lucky because they have a massive digitization of almost all their sources. So that could be the first step, no? Because when you have it in an electronic format, in my experience, you can begin to do a lot of combinations. Yes, but you need as well the software to do that analysis. And well, about the software and all this trend about the digital humanities, I have to explore more of the things. Okay, the second comment is on the content of the analysis. Well, congrats for your project. I think, yeah, that the recovery of this network of discourse is quite relevant because we can establish the discursive context of each text, article, and intervention. Yeah, through the journals, we can establish the trends and to establish the mainstream of several discussions and development. No, so I think that doing things like your project, in doing so, we can trace the regularity of concepts and ideas, and especially we can establish the dialogic key of many legal developments, and I think this is quite relevant because, in my view, uh, this work on primary sources and well, with this numerical and statistical analysis is quite really relevant because the historiography and the literature, in my view, have not delivered that account. Yeah, so if we can have that account based on hard facts and hard data, yeah, I think it is quite enriching. So thank you very much, and sorry I extend too much my comment.
Thank you, Fernando. Maybe Hans-Peter can also ask the question, and we start. we open the field for the answers.
Am I the next one?
Yes, Hans-Peter Heike and Serge Doshi, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I saw a little later.
Nadia, Anna Maria, thank you very much for this very interesting and impressive paper you gave to us. Just a very simple, it's always, I mean, everyone tries to find the mistake in this in your paper. It's very easy. Everyone tries to ask new questions. So a very simple question: how far can you get in analyzing these data without knowing the concrete topic of the paper he wrote? So if you have a paper by a French author, and he only quotes French authors because this can be because it's a very French topic. And on the other hand, if you say, let's talk about life insurance. Life insurance is a field, but it's not a topic. And in this field, you have, for example, Roman law questions. For example, these contracts for third parties. It's a typical question for life insurance. And it's a very old question. It's Savigny, it's Thomas. It's a French, it's an international law question. So everyone would expect an international community of authors quoted there. So how far can you get without knowing the concrete topic?
I don't know if you want to start answering, and then we have three more words.
Anna Maria, you want to answer? Or? Yeah, okay. Just here, the first question for the digitalization. For us, it wasn't digitalized. It was all handmade. So we have to say it. It was handmade, and we count each reference with papers, not at all digitalized. Okay. Well, sorry. For your question, Hans-Peter, thank you. Of course, it is the main problem, but for us, we have some answers. We think it can't be the only methodology, okay? You can't stop here because it's nonsense. As we said, it's just a way to isolate and to show things, but after the work began. So the concrete content of the papers is the main purpose for us. We don't want to say this methodology can replace or no, it's just another tool, a new tool used for us to show things, but after the work began. So we totally agree with that. But in life insurance, I'm not totally agree with you. It's an old topic. Of course, it's an old topic, but for our authors, it's a totally new topic. So we read those papers. We have not just count the quotations and the data. We read them. So we read them. So what they say they have to renew the way to think this topic. And life insurance is for them something to rebuild. So as we said, when they quote Doma, for example, it's not for searching an answer at all. They don't searching answers on Doma's work, on Roman law. They are only, for example, in introductions, they say, okay, this topic is quite old. Okay, we have old answer. But they say the social, the economic conditions are totally new. So we have to renew, we have to find new answers. And then they use Americans, they use Belgium, reference from Belgium and elsewhere. And this is kind of disrupting something is in their discourse. They are not at all like all lawyers, even from until the middle of the 12th century. They think in front of a new question, they have to build new answers. So sometimes the old answers are not useful for them. They could be, I agree, but they don't think so. They search new way to apprehend those new matters, and a lot of references and quotation on those papers are mixed. Maybe I'm not sure of it, but it's kind of intuition, and I think Alamaya could be agree with that. That you have different level in this legal discourse. It's not something totally rational and homogeneous. How you say it? Homogenic. Okay. They use different type of quotation, different type of references, and they have not the same how you say it condition or the same importance, because some of those quotations are not important, and this is a very weakness of our study, because some of quotation are not important at all. When you read it well, it's not important, but some of them are really important, and it is not always the one we think. It's something else. So this kind of study for us is just another step to come back to legal history, the one we all do, and to read the paper, and etc., etc. So it's in this kind of new topics and new fields, it could be interesting to use both of them, and that's what we want to say, nothing else.
Thank you. Well, we have Heikki, Serge, and Massimo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anna Maria and Nader, for the very interesting presentation. I think it will be it was interesting because also the answers that you had and the results were not obvious at all. They were quite intriguing, actually, and it would be very interesting to make similar studies from other countries of Europe and America to have a comparison of what really was the center and what was the periphery and so forth. But I have a concrete question, which I think Nader touched upon, but then did not have time to develop it, which I think it's still very important as regards the reviews, your first graph, which has to do with the editing principles of the journal. Where did the reviews come from, actually? Did they mainly come from as the editors' idea, or did they come directly from the reviewers themselves? I think this makes an enormous difference, really. And do we know about this? Probably they both. I can guess that the answer is, well, both. But in what proportion, or could you say something about that? Thanks.
Serge, if you want to.
Yes, ciao, Anna Maria, bonjour, Nader. I have two questions. The first question is a little bit in the continuity of what Heikki said. You didn't introduce about the book reviews a chronological factor. And it would maybe be interesting to see about book reviews if during the period you are studying, there are differences. Are there evolutions which can be linked to the persons who are in charge of the journal, to the policy of the journal, to new tendencies as a consequence of an international conference or something like this? So would it be possible to add in your graph a chronological issue? And my second question is about the references in the papers. You studied from the example of life insurance. Is it possible to have an idea of first-hand and second-hand references? Because I presume when an author finds Lefort and he's quoting Lefort, he also finds the references of Lefort. So he, of course, can use the reference of a previous article, even if he didn't see that article really. And I don't know if at that time, and I don't know if today, everybody is saying, I'm quoting this author indirectly because it's quoted by someone else. So is it possible to have an idea of really, maybe by having, I don't know, references about the library of someone and knowing what kind of books he really had, but he could, of course, also go to public library, but is it possible to see when reading the articles which really are the first-hand and eventually the second-hand references?
Massimo, just to close this round.
Thank you very much. When your study was published, I found it remarkable and very original. And yes, it's a very original way to deal with the problem of mapping legal knowledge. And this presentation today confirms the interest of this approach. Give us a relevant contribution, I think, to understand, in order to understand the legal culture, tools for improving legal culture, circulation of legal works, scientific references network, and so on. Is already a valuable approach itself. But I'm thinking about what kind of link, can we imagine with the history of legal thought? To what extent can this kind of analysis contribute to clear the question of the circulation of ideas? I mean, if our interest is the development of ideas and concept, the process of construction of ideas and concept, can this method of analysis, this kind of quantitative method, provide additional information? Only that.
Thank you. Anna Maria, maybe you want to answer?
Oh, okay, maybe I can try to answer to Eiki the question about the book reviews. And I must say that, yes, it depends, of course, on the capacity of the directors of the reviews to get the books, the publications. But for other research we made in other occasion, I must say that, for example, from the Italian point of view, I can say that it was quite common for Italian scholars to send their, come si chiamano, I tiri a part. How do you call them in English? I don't know in this moment. The
Off-print.
Okay, you have understood. The small, just the article.
The
and
off-print.
Found in, sorry?
Off-print.
Off-prints, thank you, Eiki, thank you. The off-prints. For example, I tried to analyze this topic of the book reviews in commercial law journals, and I found that the Italian scholars studying commercial law used to send their off-prints. And for example, Thaler, the director of the Annales de droit commercial, said that for him it was quite easy to prepare the part with the Italian book reviews, because the Italians used to send their publications. So I think that, again, it's what was saying Nader, answering Professor Hafferkamp, or also what was saying Serge Doshi. We have to, for me, the idea is to think that these tools are an aid to our research, but they cannot be the only means to study these topics. And for me, it was easier to use these means, thanks to Nader, because the quantitative means for me are very complicated, but in fields where I had already worked, where I already knew something. For me, it was very interesting to visualize things that I had seen, but I could not really explain, or not explain, but visualize this idea of interactions, relation, quotation first-hand, second-hand, I fear that we cannot get the answer. Nowadays, also nowadays, it's very difficult, and I repeat to my students only first-hand quotation, but no, it's quite difficult. So I think that this kind of tool is very useful when you can use it to enrich your research and to visualize, to map what you are studying. Maybe as Nader was saying, sometimes you can visualize things in different ways. Not all of them are correct. It depends on the choices, on the data, but it gives you other ideas to work on this topic of networks. And yes, so no, I think I said what I wanted to say. Thank you.
If I can complete what I totally agree with Anna Maria. For the first question about question from Aiki, we have a lack of archives. Here, we have a big problem. We research with Anna Maria archive from the Revue Générale du Droit and the Archives Juridico. We don't have it. We don't have them. So it's very complicated to answer, but it is sometimes both. Sometimes it depends on which director. It's linked to the question from Serge. The director are very important, but here we choose a decade with the same persons. So for us, it's not a matter of chronology. It's one decade, only one decade, and always the same actors. So it was very simple, but it could be, of course, for sure, it's more interesting if we can do it for a larger scale of period. So we can then introduce chronological matters, and it's very important, very relevant for sure. And for answering to all the question, also Massimo question, for us, it is a big problem. As said Michel Tropper, for example, concepts have no history. And it's very Kelsenian perspective, but we can agree with that, because if we introduce history, it is not a history of concept, it's a history of succession of concept and different concepts. Then it could be interesting, we think, to do such map visualization. Why? Because we can see sometimes you have effects of rupture, disrupting effects you can't see when you read books. It's a matter of, I don't know how to say that, but with proceeding with objective data is a way to show things you can't see only by reading books, as we do every day, all of us. Sometimes, and here is a small scale, so maybe it's not very impressive and relevant, maybe, I don't know, but we are sure that in a larger scale, it can show something new you can't see with your only eyes, your individual eyes. It's a way to, it's like when the fundators of sociology, I'm thinking about Weber or also on Durkheim, when they say sometimes we have to be more objective because we are always in the subjective way when we read books. Sometimes we have to push away the object and then to see new things. And it's the same kind of thought here. By visualization, by mapping, maybe, we're not sure at all. It's very prospective and very artisanal way to do things. It's not industrial at all, because even if you have a digitalization of all your sources, you can't do something in industrial way. You have to make, as I will say, a lot of choices, what you are looking for. It is the main matter, the main question. If I look for something, I can find it. But the way you can find it is a question, a new question, we think, and maybe it can be an apport, how you say, something new, something useful for legal historians to to do this step away from the object and maybe to answer new questions or maybe have new answers, but we don't know, really. It's totally perspective. We have more questions than answers. Sorry, but it's a way to, you know, it's we are sure we need some heuristic tools, and because we are always saying the same things. Really, in legal history, when you take books, as we say, second hand, we are doing a lot of things by second hand, myself, every day. And if we want to ask new questions, maybe, I'm not sure at all, we're not sure with Anna Maria at all, but maybe we have new answers, maybe, or new questions again. And this is a game for us. It was a very hard work, but it was also a game to how we can do with that. It's very artisanal, but we think it's because we are always speaking about circulation of ideas, for example, and then we put those answers to history of concept. If we think circulation is going this way, for example, the mainstream from Germany to Italy, you can see something else happen. It's not a way to think. It's not Germany have this big influence. It's not a question, for sure. But maybe you have something more complicated from Italy, for example, or in France. Maybe they took inspiration elsewhere. But how you can see that? And that's why we have done this work. Maybe we have little new information could be useful for us for in our work of legal historians.
Well, may I, if there are no words, I abuse of my role as moderator to, oh, Julia, okay. I had also a few comments and questions, but Julia first.
But just, well, thank you. Well, above all, thank you for the wonderful seminar, which was really very enlightening. And just a very short question regarding the methodology, because I find the methodology you used very useful and really very appropriate for your purposes. But it's particularly difficult because specialized statistical studies are needed to make this quantitative analysis of the data you collected. So did you have the help in the project of statisticians or economists, or do you think that in that case it could enrich and offer different outcomes from their specific point of view? Just the question.
And I want to answer? No? No? Okay. Alors, you asked the right question. As we said, it is totally artisanal. We are poor legal historians. So we have a few knowledge, but it was, you know, perspective. At the beginning, we don't have any money. So we can't hire anyone. So you have to do it yourself. So I spend a lot of time learning how to use the tools. It's totally, you know, personal and artisanal. But in Bordeaux, I have some students in PhD using this methodology and following courses and curriculum of statistical analysis, for example. So they became, we are the first generation of poor legal historians, and they be more professional and more efficient, much more. And then maybe we can get some money to hire some statisticians, because when we learn by comparison. So we had a look on what they do in economy, in mapping legal mind, for example, in judicial decisions in the United States, the Supreme Court of the United States, they use this kind of tools. We read a lot, but it's always by comparison, and we learn slowly and it's in not very rational method. by now.
You need an economist for free in your project. Because it would be really very enriching.
Yes, but I work with economists.
A friend or
yes, but it's very hard because our questions are not the same. We can't, as I saw by now, I don't know for sure, but I work, for example, with an economist in Bordeaux who works on invention in the United States, and he uses those kind of tools. But it's very easy. It's all digitalized and it's all data at the beginning. But for us, we have to create the data. It's not done. You don't have the data in your text. You have to make a lot of choices to select it, to give a meaning to the data you choose. So we have to be inspired. You have to work with them. But so I think we have to build our own methodology to be careful, because it's not, for example, judicial decisions are quite easy to mobilize. For me, I saw what they've done in the United States, for example, about the Supreme Court. It's not very hard. But for us, for text, as Maximo says, for history of concept, for text of thinkers, it's not at all the same thing. So we have to work with them. We have to work, for sure, you are right, but you are all welcome, and everybody's welcome in this kind of things. It's a little bit crazy.
I have the impression, any other words right now? I had the impression, oh, thank you. It was very, very enlightening. Before I read the text, I was a little skeptical about bibliometrics, and I really liked it. I thought it was you made a very good case of how bibliometrics can break the canon, so to say. It can open the horizon for references that we are not expecting in a certain field, and it can also change what we were expecting. I have this impression, and I'm very interested also in how it can be an interesting tool to historicize the cultural practice of quotation also, because I see that it also called my attention that the Arquivo Jurídico, less reviews, foreign books reviews, but Bonolis is the author, much more richer in the intertextual reference. So what was the use of what role played the Revue Générale with these translations? And just a reminder, just a few thoughts that came while I was reading. And also at some point in the text, you are very optimistic about the Ancien Régime, about using these methods in the Ancien Régime. And I wonder if what would interest me would be the frontier zones between what Serge Dochy asked before, the chronology aspect. Doma, as you said, was used by Valéry to legitimate the field. The use of old authorities also could play a relevant role. And I have the impression, now thinking of the American context, I mean South American context, 19th century, which are the field that most of us here work, I have the impression that the results of a bibliometric map would be much more surprising for the American context, for Brazil, for Argentina, than for Europe, between France and Italy. I think it's more, not that it was not surprising, some of the results are also fine because everybody is expecting Germany, although the Brazilian libraries of the 19th century of lawyers are full of French books, but not necessarily, of course, French authors, the translations of English books or German, many German the books were circulated there. So I want to know, this will be the concrete question, if you have some thoughts about that. When we have a field, an academic field, which is still between tradition and scientificity, the use of references, as you say, the quotations are increasing at some point, to say in the text, are increasing to enhance the scientificity. And in the Ancien Régime, it's another logic, it's another cultural practice of quotation. So I wonder if you have some thoughts, if you looked at it, if any of the 30 charts which were discarded, as you said, were taking this into account. So just this remark.
Maybe I can try to say something about the first part of your, the first question you put, Laura. And it's very interesting what you are saying, because in fact, there is not a correspondence between the connection of the review and the connection of the single authors who publish in the review. And not in this research, but in other research I did, I found exactly the same articles published in very well-connected law review, which were not themselves full of foreign quotations as we may expect. So I think that we have to, how can I say, to separate and to think that some reviews had a specific policy of connections, and sometimes they managed to persuade the scholars to follow, and sometimes they failed. I remember something that I wrote, written by Thaler on commercial law, and he said that he made great efforts to make available also to French scholars the foreign literature, but in the end, in the quotation, in the use, not the quotation, but really the direct knowledge of foreign authors, it didn't change so much. And I think that this is different in the different countries, because it's just an impression, so take it as my personal opinion. I have the impression that in Italy, in some part of Italy, this legal cultures very open to foreign authors was more rooted. How can I say? It was easier to quote foreign scholars, but really, and to read them and to use them. But this is something that many of us experience, I think, in his or her own research. So I think that you really mentioned a key point, which is the role of the review as a channel of transmission of ideas, and the real effect of this transmission in the
and maybe the French exceptionality again. Because I mean, which in Brazil, I can say that for the American, South American context, and also for Spain, Portugal, and Italy, it's not any scholar in the end of the 19th century would never quote only Portuguese authors or only for the French, it was possible. I mean, maybe it's the French exceptionality that is coming into the picture. All the other, I don't know about the German, if we could say the same, but.
And a small about your other remark on the Ancien Régime, I don't know. For example, one could think about using these quantitative methods to study the I consilia, the counts, the consilia sapientis, or this literature, which has a lot of, it has already been studied a lot, this literature, 16th, 17th century councils, and maybe this could be, but I don't know, it's just something I let Nader.
If I can add something, I totally agree. This kind of methodology must be adapted to each period of time. For example, I study the quotation of Ancien Régime in books in the middle of 19th century. And then you can see you have a lot of quotation without any meaning, because they use them as pure tools. So you can have a text full of references, but all those references are only to say that what the author say is right or wrong. And it's kind of construction of the discourse. So it could be meaning nothing. And it is one black point of this methodology. If you take it too seriously, you can end in the dead end or failure, because it means sometimes nothing. It's just to make your text prettier, more clever, to be brilliant, to quote a lot of authors, but at the end you do something else, you say something else. So it could be very dangerous to use it sometimes. So that's why you can't stop with those kind of studies. You have to go further and to read the text and to analyze and interpret. So of course, and this is a big difference between Ancien Régime and now. For example, when you say in French exception, I think the exception is only in civil law. Elsewhere, it's not right. In public law, for example, in France, they are full of German references, for example. But in civil law, yes, you are right. They are only national, mostly national, even today. And even today, if a concept comes from elsewhere, they do a francisation of the concept. So it became French concept in civil law, but it's quite linked to the civilian in France. Not in public law, not, of course, in international law, not in commercial law, for example. So we have to be careful of the field and the. I don't want to be too long.
More questions, remarks? Nothing, nobody else. I could follow, but I'm refraining myself because I know that some of our colleagues have to teach now in a few minutes. So I don't know, we should close then if there are no more questions. I would like to thank you very, very much for all of you. Applause that Heike is beginning. Thank you very much for our speakers, and thank you all. I hope from now on it's going to be, we are going to adopt this blended modality of the seminar. So we hope to welcome you in next questions. And of course, the promise is now being recorded that Madrid, we are going to plan a real, not virtual visit to Madrid with Ana Maria and Nader.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
I'm going to clap with the sound. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Laura, for the organization. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Julia.
And we hope we can see everybody in real.
We hope so. Very soon.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Adios.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much, really.
Many greetings to people here in Bordeaux, to Letitia, Xavier, the colleagues there. I'm owing Xavier an email. We were planning also his coming, and yeah, now everything is like this, but
in happier days we can do that.
In happier days, yes. Okay, no, thank you very much.
Thank you to you, really. And till next seminar, if I manage, I try to.
Yes. Send us, yes, please.
Yes.
Yes, no, the programs are there. The next one will be, it's a little scary. It will be in slow Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese.
Okay, allora the second.
And all the rest, but we will circulate the text.
Okay.
We circulate the text in advance, but all the other ones are in Spanish and
more
English.
accessible.
More
Okay.
Spanish. Actually, Mia is going to present the book where you were. She's going to present she was going to present the book, the legal literacy book where you are authors. But and she's going to introduce the book and then enter in a specific case about women and literacy in the 19th century.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So see you soon. Thank you very much.
Well,
Bye. Bye.
bye. Thanks.
Julia, thank you. Laura.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.